I spent the first 3 weeks of 2023 being trapped by mudslides, cutting up downed trees, digging drainage trenches, and playing high stakes chicken with a generator. I'd originally planned for my first video back to be doing something fun with like thread, but no, we're doing another knitting and ranting episodes that I can tell you all about the nightmare that 2023 has been so far. My name is Emmy, this is Crafter of Many Kinds, and as you can see, the cardigan is still not finished, okay? This whole story starts on New Year's Eve when I was supposed to be joining my partners Paul and Jess in Oakland for a party. They had already left for the party the day before, so I was home by myself and I was finishing up packing when I started getting pings on my phone. It had already been raining for 5 days straight, and it was finally on New Year's Eve when things started to get real. Now, I mentioned before that there is a curse on our house, and anytime that Paul is gone longer than a night, something horrible happens at the house. Now, this has been medical emergencies, gutters breaking, power boxes frying, or dangerous animals appearing, but this has been, so far, just the worst thing that the house has done. Now, to reiterate, we live deep in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I mean, sure, there is still just a Starbucks only 15 minutes away from my house, but I do have to drive down a tiny, windy mountain road to get there. We live so deep in the woods that one time I literally looked out my window and saw a deer just watching me get dressed through the windows. We've even had to have an arborist come by the house and actually check out the health of our forest, okay? That is how deep we live in the woods. And since California has been living in a semi-permanent form of drought, the community that we live in is mostly organized about being aware of fire emergencies, not water emergencies. In fact, the CZU fire in 2020 happened only a couple miles away from our house and was one of the fires that contributed to turning the sky orange in San Francisco for a day. But now, our area is dealing with the next issue that comes after huge forest fires, which is mudslides. Because everything that holds the dirt in place has been burnt away. Climate change. Our community is just on one long road in the mountains, and it does have emergency exits that are dirt paths, which are meant to be used in case of fire emergencies. But during a water emergency, they just turn to mud, and then which meant that on New Year's Eve, when I suddenly started getting pings on my phone, it was because a large mudslide had come down and everyone in our neighborhood was effectively stuck until someone could dig us out. Luckily for us, we have a bunch of badass neighbors, and they went out there in the rain with a bunch of shovels and a backhoe and were able to get the path open. However, because the rain was still going, they pretty much said that there was no guarantee that it was going to stay open and that it was actually more likely that the slide was going to fall again in the next couple of hours. And they said that there was no guarantee that when the slide went down again, if they would even be able to dig another hole out for who knows how long. So I was given two options. Try to get out before the slide went down and potentially get trapped on the other side, or stay home alone in the most intense wave of the storm up to that point and just try to ride it out. I decided that I wasn't going to risk being separated from our cats for an unknown amount of time, so I just decided to stay. Which was a huge bummer because I was really looking forward to the New Year's party. I even bought a cute little sequin dress because the theme was sparkles and it was like gold and raspberry, and I bought some new shoes and I just did not get to go. Anyway, about 3 o'clock, I am sitting watching TV while the rainstorm is pounding on the roof, and then I get another notification on my phone, which says that the slide had totally gone and we were, in fact, completely trapped. And that was the point when the house knew that Paul wasn't coming back. The house curse suddenly decided to manifest itself by all of the lights going out. And as I was sitting in the living room, I could hear our generator attempt to kick on and failing. Now, the power grid in the Santa Cruz Mountain is abysmal at best. So all of our neighbors pretty much have generators. That should tell you something about how often the power goes out in Santa Cruz. So I knew that our generator normally has trouble kicking in during a storm. So I went ahead and I got my whole rain kit on. I put on a raincoat, I put on some galoshes, and I splashed myself down the hill to where our generator was hiding out to try to find out what the problem with the generator was. And it was clear from the moment that I got down there, because the generator, which sits underneath our deck, was sitting in 4 inches of rainwater. What had happened was that one of our drain pipes that we'd already had issues with had broken in a different spot, which I absolutely couldn't reach. And it was draining all of the water that was hitting the east side of the house down onto where the generator sits instead of through the drainage system down the hill. All of this water was collecting on the relatively flat area that our generator is on. So obviously our generator had not started because it was covered in water. Now, when I am presented with a major problem, for the first minute or two, I am completely frozen. I basically just stand still, swearing over and over again until I can wrap my head around what the problem is and start trying to formulate a plan. And that is absolutely what happened here. I just sat there looking at the puddle, dropping a bunch of F-bombs and like holding the sides of my head, just going, oh, oh, no, oh, no, oh, God. So after I was done moaning, I figured that the best thing to do was to dig a drainage trench through the mud and off to the nearest opening on the retaining wall on our hill, which was about 6 yards away. And I would have to dig it deep enough so that the angle would be enough to keep the water running from the drain pipe past the flat portion and then down the hill again. So once I had figured out the best and most accessible, reasonable plan of action, I ran up the hill because we had just bought a brand new shovel. So I went into the garage to go grab it. And when I opened the door of the garage, water started streaming out from under the door. So I've talked about in a couple of videos about our large garage, which is the area that I've been working on for the last couple of months to turn into a usable studio for this channel. And as you can see, you might have noticed that that is not where I am currently sitting. I spent weeks cleaning out the garage and setting it up, fitting it with lights, making backdrops, setting up shelves. And I had really been looking forward to using that space pretty much for all of my videos going forward. But after the storm, I think it's going to be a little while before that's a reality. Because when I opened the garage and water started flowing out, I saw that there was about a ½ inch of water across most of the garage. And it was soaking up into my tablecloths, into my backdrops. It was soaking costume pieces, fabrics, pretty much anything that was on the floor that was not made of plastic or metal was ruined. And that also includes for the other area of the garage, which is filled with a lot of our sentimental belongings. All of it was just completely soaked or was in the process of soaking up more water. It felt like I did not have enough time or energy to save both the generator and the studio. And so I had to choose where to put my energy. And obviously the correct choice was with the generator. So I grabbed the shovel and I picked up what few easy things that could be saved, and I had to just leave the garage because there was nothing that I could do by myself that would meaningfully help the things that were in there before the sun set. That was the moment that I started crying. The studio has been a huge source of stress for me, as I mentioned in my other videos, and the amount of damage was so overwhelming that even in the last 3 weeks, I've only gotten up the courage to go out there once to sort of see what I could do to sort things out. And I have not finished. I have not even begun the process of trying to clean it up. We've pretty much been in crisis mode since New Year's Eve, so there hasn't even really been the time yet. And obviously it's something that I will have to go back to, but I don't really have the wherewithal to deal with it just yet. And I would like to point out that we got probably the minimal amount of flooding that most of the people in this crisis did. Now, even just a couple of towns over, Felton and Boulder Creek and Ben Lomond, they were evacuated because the flooding was so bad. They had literally chest height levels of water flowing through the streets. So if you can see how badly it affected me to have to deal with a ½ inch of water, you know, spare a thought for our poor neighbors that had to deal with, you know, the water being halfway up their walls. So it's bad, but it is not as bad as it definitely could have been, or how it was for other people. When I left the garage, I ran back down the hill and I started digging, and I spent, I would say, the next hour digging through the mud and attempting to get the water to flow off of where it was pooled around the generator. And as the sun was starting to set and I was getting cold and I was completely drenched and was alone in the deep woods for New Year's, I had sort of like a reverse Shawshank Redemption moment. So I'm standing out in the rain, and instead of feeling freedom, I am asking myself, why did we do this? Why are these my problems? Why am I stranded alone in the forest on New Year's? You know, why did we choose to move here? It was a really good thing that we didn't have any neighbors particularly close to our house, because I was pretty much standing out in the rain doing a cackling Joker laugh, and I am sure that anyone who had seen that would definitely be questioning my sanity, which is honestly what I was doing at that moment, so that would have been just fair. Between that and the mess that was in the garage, as soon as I was able to get the water drained and the generator off, I went into my room, I stripped off all of my muddy clothes, I basically just fell straight into bed at about 6 o'clock and just went to sleep. I wanted nothing to do with New Year's. I was exhausted. But I ended up waking up at 11:50, and I remembered that during our other holiday video that I promised Nick, my brother-in-law, that I would film him a ball drop for this New Year's. Welcome to the Crafter of Many Kinds New Year's live stream. I'm coming to you live from the West Coast from my bed because I actually went to sleep a couple of hours ago. But I decided to wake up just in time to give you the 10-second countdown. Except for instead of a ball, I've got an empty Toblerone package. So here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's 2023 and I'm so tired. Good luck. Good luck. Happy New Year's. This one's just for you, Nick. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was out and my neighbors had been able to clear a path through the second slide so that people could get through if they needed to. But there was another set of storms coming up in the next couple of days that were going to be as dangerous, if not more so, than the one that I had just survived through. So when Paul and Jess managed to get back later in the day of New Year's Day, that is when the real long haul between us and our generator began. Due to the dangerous road conditions, I was able to log into work remotely as long as our generator was working. And luckily, a few days before the first storm, we had our generator refilled. So on Monday, we were sitting at about 60%, which was about 6 days worth of power. But by Tuesday night, we were growing concerned because our generator was set to run out this day after the next big storm. And if the mudslide covered the road again, it would be really difficult for a propane truck to get in. The company also refused to let us order more propane before our tank hit lower than 30%, so that also made things a bit difficult. So on Tuesday night, we decided to conserve energy by turning off the generator. And when we did that, for some reason, the lights didn't turn off. And we were freaking out at first, like, what have we done wrong? Did we break the generator? Like, what happened? And then it took us a while to realize that the power had somehow come back on and that our generator hadn't turned off. So what had happened was, after my digging fiasco, I had gone to turn on the generator and I set it to manual because I was manually turning on the generator. And I didn't switch it back to automatic, which would have made the generator turn off when the power came back on. And the power had come back on 2 days earlier. So we had been running our generator for 2 days longer than it needed to be. I can't really describe how upset I was with myself. Making other people suffer because I have made a mistake is one of my worst fears. And that is exactly what happened in this situation. Had I even thought about it, we would have been much more comfortable over the next few days had I not made that mistake. It took a toll on me mentally for the next 2 weeks. And especially as the next storm rolled over. And all of that was compounded by the fact that Wednesday morning I was woken by a knocking on our door, which turned out to be a police officer that was going door to door telling people that if they wanted to evacuate, they needed to do it right now, or that they should be prepared to be trapped in their houses for the next 3 days. They had determined that the slide at the front of our road was just going to get worse and that it was going to cut us off and that the storm was going to be so bad that no emergency crews were going to risk attempting to get to us until the storm broke on Friday. So we felt pretty confident we had enough propane and food that was going to last us, until like the end of the weekend. We didn't want to move Jess and the cats So we just decided to stay. We figured we were going to be fine holding it up together. The power did not end up lasting for very long because when the storm hit, it knocked the power out again with another slide. During this time, I was also working from home doing really stressful billing. And I remember just sitting there on Wednesday working on my bills while a giant storm raged outside. And I was thinking about how ridiculous it was that despite the fact that I was sitting in the middle of a natural disaster, that I was having to write medical bills. Like, I'm grateful that my work was really helpful and allowed me to still make an income while being trapped in the mountains. But let me tell you, it is not really a great working environment to be sitting and attempting to focus on your work while you're simultaneously worried about a giant tree coming and falling through your roof, because that was absolutely a thing that could have happened. I was also worried about the generator flooding again. I was also worried about trees falling down onto our cars. Like, I was just sitting through that entire storm on Wednesday on pins and needles while also simultaneously attempting to do my job. It was awful. It was just awful. Eventually, the sun came out on Friday, and our neighbors gallantly dug out the next slide and a path wide enough that like really heavy duty cars like large trucks or four-wheel drives could get through, but nothing else. And we went ahead and put in an emergency order for our propane because we had just hit 30% that morning. So we spent that one sunny day hanging outside, talking to neighbors, checking out the house to see what kind of damage there was. And we discovered that the top 30 feet of one of our redwoods next to the end of our driveway had snapped off and had landed partially in the road. So here was the top of the tree, and it goes let's see here, to there. It's at least, I'd say that's at least 20 feet. And then this section here, which is about maybe 9 feet. And then that section over there, which is about 6. So, and it came off of this big one right there, which we can tell because it's now missing its top. Sort of hard to see. Here we go. Yeah, huge at the base. So in my cabin fever, stir crazy brain, I was like, I want that redwood, because in California, it is illegal to cut down redwood, but there are no rules against anything that's been knocked down on private property. So I spent 4 hours cutting up that log and taking it across the street back onto our property and sorting it all out. And eventually there will be a craft for that as soon as it dries out. It takes about 6 weeks to dry out. So I guess, look forward to that. Also, I found a salamander while I was doing that. Little Newt buddy is checking out. I found him while I was chopping up the tree right down here. What an explorer. He already climbed up my arm. I know I'm not supposed to touch him really with my skin, so I'm just gonna find him a nice spot out here. Well, yeah, in just a sec. Okay, buddy? Oh, he's okay. He's okay. We were in pretty high spirits on Saturday. There was only light rain, so I was able to make my way into work. And it wasn't until I was on my way home that I started to realize how much damage had actually been done to our local area. There were tons of mini slides on the highway. There was downed trees everywhere, and a bunch of roads that I had used before had just been completely closed off because they had either started falling apart or they had been washed away. There was a bunch of videos in our local neighborhood where people were watching the roads literally just slide away. So while we were waiting for a propane delivery on Saturday night, the lights suddenly and surprisingly came back on. And for one day, we got to do laundry, we got to turn on all the lights. It was really nice. And then Monday morning came rolling around and the power flicked out again, and we were then stuck with our generator at only 15%. Had the incident with the generator staying on not happened, or had the people actually shown up on Saturday, Monday would not have been the worst day of the whole incident. So Monday the 8th was somehow at the same time the worst day, but also the most relaxing day of the whole experience. I ended up making us pancakes on the camp stove because we decided to turn off the generator during the day, which meant that we needed to get rid of a bunch of our fresh supplies that were in the fridge. And we all ended up sitting in the living room, either hanging out or reading books, because there was literally nothing else that we could do. And that was nice and relaxing until in the afternoon the rain started to pour again. At that point, we went to go find our emergency radio because we didn't have the internet anymore, so we weren't getting any more emergency pings. We were able to find the local Santa Cruz broadcasting station, and it was just a huge disaster report. Like, literally, the DJ said, "We are here right now, but so much of the city is flooded that we could be evacuated at any moment, at which point we'll go off the air." And they just read off the county list of damages around our town. And it was peak early 2020 vibes. Being stuck in your house, knowing that there's something terrible going on outside, and the only thing that you're allowed to do, and the best thing for you to do, is to just sit inside and do nothing. We got really lucky because right next to us, rivers reached their peaks, giant log jams were formed because of how much debris was being pulled off of the mountain. Trees fell onto roads, onto power lines, slides completely wiped out highways, they caved in roads. Every day during those 3 weeks, we were pretty much checking our devices on an hourly basis to see the kind of damage that was going on, and just hoping that one of our few main roads were not going to be compromised beyond a position where we wouldn't be able to get out, or that help wouldn't be able to get to us, because alternatively, like, that was a huge issue too. There was a point where we discussed, what does us abandoning our house look like? At what point do we call it quits? What point do we leave the mountains? And luckily we didn't reach that point, but there were a lot of other people, that did have to do that. Like, the only other thing that I can kind of compare this to was a hurricane. And the one thing that I would say that the big difference, I think, between these two things is that with a hurricane, it's big, it's scary, it comes barreling at you. But when it comes, it lasts for a few hours, maybe a day if you're really unlucky. And then it passes. And instead, this was just wave after wave after wave. And it would break up and the sun would come out and it would stop raining for just a little while, just to start pouring rain all over again. And it just felt like we were being drowned by the storm, and that they were just toying with us and giving us just enough air, to breathe for a minute before, boom, just shoving our heads down into the water again. And I personally think that was worse. I think what history is going to remember this storm system for was not necessarily that each of these particular storms that passed over us, of which I think their total was 9, it's that while each of those storms were not that awful, that the ground had already been completely saturated by the time the first one arrived. And that meant all of the water that was falling from the sky was going just straight downhill and knocking out everything that wasn't bolted down. Our friend, actually a couple of towns over, his house had 36 inches of rain come down in 2 weeks. And again, we just got lucky because we're so far up the mountain that there isn't much above us, to catch anything to flood with. But the people who were a couple miles away were not that lucky. I tried to film this video a couple of times while the whole situation was still going on, and I just couldn't. I don't have the ability to be creative while I'm also in a survival situation. Kudos to those people who are able to film through these things, but I was not one of them. Being cold and stressed and without consistent power is not very conducive to my creative process. And after 20 days of just low-level stress, that made it impossible to film. But I would like to say that despite this whole situation being awful, we got really lucky. There was no lasting damage to our house. We were never forced to evacuate, and our jobs and vehicles were all fine. And that is really more than I can say for a lot of the people who live nearby. So if you would like to donate to disaster relief for our area, the best place to go is cfscc.org, which is the disaster relief fund for our county. As of January 20th, Julie Packard is matching donations dollar for dollar, so if you donate $5, it'll actually be $10. Santa Cruz is one of the smaller California counties, and it mostly consists of redwood forests and beaches. They're also really active in both ocean and wildlife conservation initiatives, and any kind of donation is going to go to helping not only the residents, but will also go to cleaning up our forests and beaches, which have been badly damaged in the last few weeks. I've donated $100 in the name of the channel, and if my story has moved you at all today, please consider just donating even a couple of dollars. It'll be really helping out all of our neighbors who weren't as fortunate. Thanks for sticking around through this really rough story. I promise we're going to get back to crafts and shenanigans in the next couple of weeks. And I did get at least a couple more rows done on the cardigan, but as you could tell, it is nowhere near being finished yet. So I guess there'll be a couple more knitting and ranting in the future. Although just a couple more inches left, I think. But now that my knitting and my ranting is over, this is the outfit that I was going to wear to New Year's. Hopefully I'll actually get to wear it to a party at some point this year. I hope your 2023 is going much better than mine has. I have no idea what the uploading schedule is going to be like for the next couple of weeks because natural disaster. So thank you for your patience, and I am so glad to have you here. This is Crafter Mini Kinds.